Hi, this is Carl with another SOP video for managed service providers. Today I want to talk about the 5 most important things you need to know about creating your overtime policy. Now, there are 5 things. The last one's the most important, but the first one is really important, so here we go. The first thing you need to know about your overtime policy is that it has to be legal. I know, that's a shocker, but here's the thing. Employment is one of the most regulated things anywhere, ever. So no matter what state or province or country you're in, employment law is gargantuan. It's extremely important, and it's one of the easiest ways that small businesses go outside the law, sometimes by accident. In the big picture, you think about employment as being fairly straightforward and that rules like overtime are pretty simple. But your state or province or country may have a completely different view of how the world works. So here's the good news. If you have an employment service, if you have a payroll processing service, either one of them is likely to have a really big book with all the rules in your territory. So now if you work across state lines, you may have to make sure that you're legal in 2 states. That's quite legit. If you work across country lines, you may have to be legal in both countries. So just make sure you know what rules govern you and make sure that you are inside of them. You would think that these rules would be fairly straightforward, and maybe they are, but just be super careful. And it wouldn't hurt to have somebody who really knows the laws around employment to verify that your overtime policy is enforceable and legal within your state. Now, employees often think, oh, this is super simple. I work over 8 hours, I get overtime. Well, maybe. In some states, you can have people who are on salary and they don't keep track of their time, and you don't pay them extra for overtime. But in many states these days, even if people are on salary, they must be paid overtime if they work more than, let's say, 8 hours in a day. So verify that you don't just think you know what it is, find out for sure what it is, and make sure you're inside the law. So I live in California. In California, if you work over 8 hours in a day, you get overtime for the day. So even if you haven't worked over 40 hours in a week, you still get that overtime per day. So in California, if somebody works 4 10-hour days, they're going to get 2 hours of overtime every day that they work. So again, it seems like it should be fairly straightforward, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is. Now, after you figure out whether or not you're inside the law, one of the key pieces of that law is going to be number 2, you need to be fair, which means you need to apply your rules across all of your employees in a fair manner. It's also the case as an employer. Come on, let's be honest. Don't abuse your employees. Be fair to your employees. Set up some guidelines. In our case, we always paid time and a half for more than 8 hours, but double time for more than 12 hours. So whether your state requires that or not, it's kind of a good policy. It's a nice way to treat human beings, although I'm not sure that somebody working over 12 hours is actually giving you really top-notch high-quality work that you are paying twice for. So if somebody's at $30 an hour and they go over 8, magically they become $45 an hour. And if they go over 12, at least in our case, they become $60 an hour, plus all the taxes and benefits and so forth that are based on that price. When I say fair, I mean all the employees who are at this level need to be under the same policy as the employees who are at this level. So you can't say, well, management has one set of rules and new employees have a different set of rules, and experienced employees have another set of rules, and da-da-da-da-da. The more sameness you have, the more enforceable your rules are, and the more you can justify them in front of a court in case it comes to that. Remember, the reason that employment law is so regulated is that employees have the right to go to the state or wherever and have it enforced. which means you may be subject to some serious penalties. So be legal, but also be fair to your employees. Now, the third and fourth items are a little bit different. They basically have to do with the success of your business. So number 3 is that your policies should be something that is scalable. What does that mean? Well, it means that no matter how big you grow, your policy should work. So for example, let's say that you have 5 employees and you've set up a policy that works really great with 5 people. That's cool. And then you get to 10, and then you get to 15 and 20, right? As you work your way up, at some point, that policy that was great for 5 people isn't going to fit so well. Now, you can look to the future and say, hey, tell you what, when we get to 40 employees, let's have a discussion of what our policies need to look like when we get to 50 or 75 or 100, right? So you can have something where you say, this is probably going to be good for 5 or 10 years, right? But it might only be good for 2 years if we grow really, really fast. So know how scalable your policies are so that you can plan to revisit them as you grow. So that was number 3. Number 4 is somewhat related to that, and that is that your policies should be reproducible. In other words, let's say that you opened another office on the other side of town or in another city. How easily can you take this policy and place it on the new office? And again, as you grow, let's say you become a franchise or you decide that you're going to have a set of policies that are across all of your franchisees, well, being able to reproduce that policy is huge because part of delivering consistent service is to be able to reproduce a policy and have it work somewhere else. Now, across the city should be pretty straightforward. It just means that on the fairness side, that whoever your managers are enforcing those policies fairly and consistently. But when you go across state lines, now you have another factor to consider. There may be different overtime policies in a different state, different sets of laws that you are subject to. So just verify that if you're going to expand in that manner, that you have a policy that is as consistent as possible. In a perfect world, it would be good to have a policy that works in both states so that employees can go back and forth and they don't have to say, now that I'm in this state, it's one set of rules, and in that state, it's a different set of rules. Make their life easy, right? Again, that's part of the fairness in all of this. Finally, number 5, the most important thing that you have to do with regard to this or any other policy is it has to be profitable. Now, I mentioned earlier of having a policy for time and a half or double time. If you have policies where, you might send somebody out on a job, and if let's say they're getting $60 an hour, but, they've got some meetings during the week and they got some other stuff going on, and it turns out that maybe they bill, let's say 32 hours in a week. That's quite reasonable. But if you put in more hours and more hours and more hours, their billable rate is going to go down just because they are overworked and they're going to be less productive, right? So when you think about what you're doing, remember, you don't want to pay people for unproductive hours, especially when your hourly rate is probably not going up. Now, you might have rules that say, hey, after 5 o'clock, we get paid time and a half. And so, you're instead of 150, right, you're at 225. That's great. You definitely make sure that you can cover it. But don't stay at that 150 and have your profit just go shrink, shrink, shrink as your people work more and more and more. Remember, there's always this balance between burning people out and getting productive labor. And, a lot of people who pay salary do so in order to save money by not paying overtime. And I think they sort of squeeze that concept of fairness a little too tight sometimes. Add a bunch of overtime or an emergency or some unforeseen problem, and suddenly you've got a situation where you've got tired, overworked people who are really not earning that much extra money. And if you haven't figured out how you're going to charge extra for that, you may be in a situation where you're actually breaking even or losing money, which, in an emergency, maybe that's okay. But again, think about 3 and 4. If it's not scalable, if it's not reproducible, you cannot lose money and then say, we're going to make it up on volume, right? That's an old joke, but the reality is you can't have policies that lose money by default. So make sure that when you look at the big picture, what kind of billing did you have last year? What kind of experiences did you have? And under what scenarios did you charge extra for overtime and other things? And when did you pay your employees overtime, time and a half, or double time? It's a big math equation, but the bottom line is you have to verify that your policies are profitable. You don't have to be super profitable, you don't have to be over profitable, but you can't lose money, especially when it comes to overtime and employees. You know, one of the early pieces of advice I got was, if you can't pay the taxes, the payroll taxes, don't pay the employees. As hard as that sounds, you have to make sure that you can pay for all those taxes that come along with the payroll. So make sure that you've got the right balance and that you have enough income to cover the payroll. I want to hear your comments, your policies, your procedures, and your questions. Put them in the comments down below. Like it if you like it, share it with your friends. And remember, I wish you absolutely the best of luck in your managed service business.